Hey everybody, Alex Randall Kittredge here. I'm the writer of ARK Strategy here on Substack. I help office workers and knowledge workers uh, build a durable career that transcends the corporate ladder in the post AI economy. I'm joined by John Brewton from Operating by John Brewton today.
Yes. Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm John Brewton from Operating by John Brewton. I'm an egomaniac and I want to have my name associated with everything. But no, it's really great to be here. Alex, thanks for doing this again. I'm excited about it. And I write about the history, economics, and future of operating companies, uh, squarely focused on small business, family business, and one person businesses. So that's my spiel. So
And today, we're going to be talking about a live stream that's been loosely titled The Last Employee, the First Founder. John wrote a really good piece this week. If you haven't checked it out, it talks about, the transition that some folks are going through now from employee to founder of their own company and their own business. And, the the premise is, and we've talked about this a number of times on Substack Live, that old employment contract, that old promise of loyalty has gone by the wayside. It's no longer the reality for millions of workers in the U.S. and around the world, but mostly in the U.S. And why did folks like that traditional employment contract? Well, it was stability. You got a direct deposit every 2 weeks.
mm,
You got a 401k match potentially, and
yeah.
that brand name legitimacy that comes with a big corporation. But
Mhm,
you know, more and more we're seeing that that has dried up, and it's not just a blip. It's really a
mhm,
structural displacement, and
mhm.
you know John, you can get into we can go back into Marx and Engels and talk about the Industrial Revolution if we want, but
We can.
maybe we'll start a
We,
little bit
we,
more
we,
recent than that.
we- uh, yeah, I think it's a yes to everything. You were just talking about. I think it's a very interesting time. I was with one of the folks I've been working with here on Substack. We were talking earlier, maybe it's yesterday or at some point over the last week or so. Um, we, we were talking and we were saying that, or he was articulating to me that it's this feeling where I'm 45, so I'm a bit older than you, Alex, but I think we probably both had a similar experience where went to college and thought, okay, get the grades and the best test scores to get into the best school you can, then go to the best school you can, then pick the right major, then work
Mm.
hard on those things, maybe try to get into grad school or just try to get out, get an internship, and then get the job with the corporate that's going to bring all the things that you were just discussing. And that felt like the safe path. And the financially very secure path. And so I think a lot of us really tried to pursue that. I think in some ways, I did do that. In some ways, I dramatically departed from that pretty early on. But I have a lot of friends who went that direction, and I think now it's this feeling of, oh, is is actually going my own path and establishing my own value very clearly, and becoming working fractionally with multiple companies, or becoming a consultant and an advisor to companies. Is that a path? But I will say I think it's a very flexible time too, where I think you could develop a great consulting business, and then you could get some great client who really wants you to engage with them and work with them for a period of time, maybe 6 months or a year or a quarter or whatever it is. And then maybe at the end of that, they say, "Hey, gosh, Alex, John, I'd love for you to. Can you come on full time? Can you come be here and work with us full time?" You've talked in the past too, having worked for startups, where
Mm.
maybe at the point of initial engagement, the company wasn't of the right size to really bring you on full time. I know Katie Barnes, who's on here, I think could certainly identify with that too. And I think that this is an era where maximum flexibility, diversity, and open-mindedness to all the different paths is really key. That's what I kind of find myself thinking about more and more. So
Well,
anyway,
I do agree with you, John, and not to, it's not an interesting live stream if the folks both just agree with each other the whole
right.
time.
Disagree with me, Alex.
But I do
Please.
think, I was at the outset of writing this Substack, going through a little bit of the Strom und Drang of like trying
Yeah.
to understand, what was
Yes.
happening in the economy. And
Yes.
I think, I know I'm talking with the optimists, so I'm
Yes.
gonna take the optimist take, but I do think it's a
Yeah.
really great point of opportunity for folks.
Hmm.
If you can get ahead of the curve and
Hmm.
start, founding your LLC or founding your own business, starting out with this fractional work or this consulting work or
Hmm.
freelance work, depending on what you want to call it. I advocate for the idea of a portfolio career. And the
Yep.
key premise behind that, I was talking with Katie Barnes, who's on here, and Juan Salas Romer earlier this week. The whole idea is that you're not beholden to one single source of income or one employer. And it's that
Right.
risk diversification. So,
Hmm.
in a portfolio career, can you have a single W 2 role? Well, yeah, you can, but you'd also have a side hustle on the side, or some
Hmm.
consulting work, or maybe a paid
Hmm.
Substack.
Sure.
You could also have a portfolio that's built up of multiple fractional roles. Maybe you work a third of your time for three different companies, and
Hmm.
that's your portfolio. But I think, you know what we're coming up against, there's two camps here, and there's the
Hmm.
folks that are want to say, you know oh, this is a big industrial revolution that we're going through. The previous one took 50 years. This
Hmm.
is happening in the span of 4 quarters, 6 quarters, and there's going to be mass displacement. Yes,
Hmm.
and I think
Yes.
you will see the displacement, but you know future favors the bold, and it favors the folks that seize the opportunity and start building now for what is coming down the pike.
Yes. Yes. I mean, mic drop. It's yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, yeah. I really no, I really no, but yes, and I think to that point, when you look at the history of economic revolutions and technological revolutions, which I think tend to kind of coincide with each other, um, uh, there is not an example of one where on the other side there were not more jobs, there were not more opportunities, and there were not new sectors and industries, types of businesses, consumer wants and needs created, or consumer wants created, and ways to solve for consumer needs created. And so I think that's one of the difficult things. I think it's very logical to have the discussion right now about AI and to talk about displacement and to say, well, what happens when the consumer no longer has money to spend on the consumer products,
Hmm.
and where and what kind of a debt spiral do we go into there, and what about the credit card companies and the banks, and and yes, like, logical. However, uh there are just too many unknowns about what is to come, and about there's the Joseph Schumpeter talking about creative destruction, and there is the destruction part of that, which we're experiencing a lot of right now, but there's an enormous amount of creativity we're experiencing right now too, and it is out of this creativity that the capital that is destroyed and that was placed into the old inventories for the old ways of being in the old economic activity is then distributed into new ventures and new opportunities and new sectors, and so I think that happens as well. uh However, to your point, I think if you're going to prepare for that, um, I think the things that you're advocating relative to a portfolio career and how you communicate your value to the marketplace, uh, getting started on that and doing that now is really critical, so that when those opportunities present, you're one of the people that, you know, that people want to work with in that regard.
Well, I want to talk about the article you wrote this week because I think it's really interesting. And I
Mhm.
know you pulled some stats, and I've read the report too from the World Economic Forum that sort of
Yeah.
forecasts 92 million jobs being displaced by AI. But
Yeah.
it also projects that we'll see something on the order of 78 million new roles created. However,
Right.
I think the big
That
question for folks is, where are those jobs? They're not here yet, or maybe they are here, but we're not
yeah.
coded for them. We don't have the skills for them. I mean, I
Right.
think that's the point that a lot of folks find themselves in.
Mhm.
They've lost the old job, the way the
Mhm.
world used to be, and they're looking for a way to move forward into the new order of things. But
Uh,
it's not altogether clear, what the timeline is for that, or how you do it.
yeah, nor will it be. I think yeah, I think you know what? I would to be very practical about it, Alex, I would say I think it's this moment where we all have to look in a very practical way about what are the skills that we've developed that are losing their utility month over month, week over week.
Mhm.
We all have those skills, right? We all know the thing that we used to be great at that we thought, oh, this is how I get paid. That
Making the
thing is
fastest PowerPoint deck.
yeah,
That's a
exact
skill
right,
that's gone by the
right,
wayside.
right, right. It's like or making the deck where the everything moves and it's just like it just looks like the fonts changing across slides, was everything's perfectly proportioned and it's beautiful and
You know,
all of that.
I
And now that's like,
I don't
thanks,
mean
Gamma.
I
Like,
don't mean to interrupt, but I
yeah,
went to a demo night last night in New York City for
yeah, no,
for
you
all
did,
these
yeah,
AI companies, and one of the
absolutely,
demos, the woman asked her AI agent to make her a presentation, and it vibe coded her an HTML website as the presentation. And she's like, I know I wasn't supposed to make a presentation, but the agent vibe coded me a website, and then she like
yeah,
clicked through the website, and it's like that's a lot. I mean, that's if a human did that, you'd be like, "Wow, that's incredible." But like,
right.
it's just the level of sophistication these days. It's a different level.
It is. And so I think we all have to be honest in looking at what are the things that we used to be good at that people would, employ us for or deem valuable about us and say like, look, what is not that valuable anymore? For instance, uh I was at various points throughout my career an Excel maestro. I all the things in Excel, all the writing of macros, the interconnected books, interconnected tabs within books, distributing information from Excel out to PowerPoint slides and making sure that all the data and everything was formatted perfectly through the writing of macros, all of that kind of stuff. Uh, I spent an extraordinary number of hours learning to do that in my career. That is no longer valuable. There's no need for me to do any of that anymore. I haven't created, I don't think that I've personally written with maybe the exception of a couple, like, basic sum equations, like, really basic stuff. I don't think that I have actually, uh, personally engineered, a spreadsheet in, like, 6 or 9 months. Like, I don't like,
Mm.
I just use these tools to do all of that work for me. Um, and I've seen other much less experienced people with a tool like Excel than me come up the learning curve to where I took 10 or 15 years to get to, they can come up the learning curve in a matter of a week or several days even. And so I think looking at the things that are no longer valuable about what you've done so far, and then figuring out, okay, what kind of work can I begin doing to develop new skills and to figure out what is going to be valuable about me moving forward. I think that's very important.
So I think that brings us to a great point. We didn't
Mhm.
necessarily talk about the protagonist in the piece you wrote this week, but the vignette is essentially, a worker who was director of strategy. She lost her job. She applied to a number of jobs, wasn't able to
Yes.
find one, and then I
Yes.
think at a certain point realized or had the revelation, whether through, engaging in Substack or creating in public, that
Mhm.
there's all this infrastructure out there that's essentially
Mhm.
free that
Right.
allows you to create a business of one. And I know that's
Yes.
a lot of what you talk about at
Sure.
operating by John Brewton, but I think, you know, Stripe, Substack, LinkedIn, social distribution, all
Mhm.
of those AI creative tools,
Mhm.
all the things that were built to maybe cut costs in a corporate environment, when used as a solopreneur or as an individual, they really make the math in a company of one start to make sense. You
Right.
don't need any approvals. You don't need a 74-person Slack channel to
Yeah.
achieve something. The the distinction that matters is having that expert judgment. And I
Mhm.
think in talking with a bunch of folks this week, someone who tasked their AI agent with, setting up a webinar for them, it gave them a webinar with a password that no one knew the password to. You know,
Oh,
you still
interesting.
you still need to have that human
Yeah.
judgment. You
Yeah.
can't unleash the AI
Yeah.
on its own fully
Sure.
yet.
Sure.
But, knowing which problem is real versus which problem is a decoy, I think that's gonna be the key to
Mhm.
success in the future.
Yeah, I think yes. Yes, I do. And I would say too that um I mean, look, I think there's a lot of fear around AI layoffs, and what and just job displacement as we've been discussing. Um, but I think the larger point is that these or the flip side of that is that the same tools that are doing that inside of these large companies, if you take them, they can also empower you to then go out and build something much more valuable for yourself. And so the conclusion of the piece is that it's a fictitious story that I wrote everybody about this person going through this modern work experience and kind of where she gets to by the end of the story. It's meant to be a little darkly funny and a little hopeful. I mean, hopefully you're laughing while you're reading it too. I I that was certainly my hope. But but anyhow, but gets to the point at the end where realizing that, oh, well, the corporation did not need her anymore. But in fact, you know what? No, she didn't need the corporation
Mm.
because she now through all that work with the corporation and the MBA and all the things she had done, she actually had a set of valuable skills and experiences that were going to enable her to build her own company and her own life moving forward, that wasn't reliant on one of the large corporates. And so and that is not everybody, but I think that is certainly happening out there.
I
Um,
think that hits pretty close to home for me, John. I think, we
well,
we spoke about this before
sure,
the
sure,
live stream started,
yeah,
but, I've been running a solo consulting company,
mhm,
an LLC. I recently
yeah,
converted it to be an S-Corp for,
mhm,
some opportunities that came my way.
sure.
I'm essentially already living the thesis that you wrote in your theoretical,
You are,
example.
you
And
are.
I think, actively looking for maybe a permanent job if it were to come along, but also open to, doing those contracting gigs in the interim. But I think
Absolutely.
the optionality and the beauty of the portfolio career is that, in having your own company or having your own legal entity, you can straddle that line between the old world and the new. And I think, we're in this transition period where those institutional roles that folks might have seen as they came out of college as the
Mhm,
end all be all, those are starting to go away. And I
mhm,
think the future really it really goes to those who don't need that institutional security anymore,
mhm,
whether because they've you know built their own individual set of skills and developed a company and
mhm,
start to build their own brand. I don't think it's necessarily a personal brand. I think it's the brand of whatever company you are starting or whatever company you are operating. And,
sure.
you know, um, what really is key to that, I think, and you touched on it a little bit, but I think
Mhm,
owning the distribution channel for your audience or your clients is going to be huge in the future
mhm,
because when everyone has access to all the tools to create and make presentations and everything,
mhm.
what really is going to differentiate folks is the level of distribution that you have.
Yes, and I think you know what I think that's a beautifully put. And what I would also kind of add to that, and kind of a road I would walk down a bit with the thinking is, um, look, I think the concept of personal brand and creator economy and these words and you know categories that we've kind of defined here. I think I think a lot of it feels like very cringe to a lot of people. It's like very embarrassing. It's very like it's like, oh God, like I don't want to do that. Like, like the more people I meet who are
Mm,
working on that because they're like, oh, I need to do that, but oh god, please don't call it that. And I can certainly feel that. Like I in actually in like the last line of my bio that I put on all my articles, it's like it's how my wife still cringes at some of my early LinkedIn posts, and
yeah.
so it's but what I think is important is this. I think that um where a lot of our ideas about what all of that means pertain to trying to grow a very large social following, trying to grow LinkedIn followers, trying to grow Instagram followers, trying to grow Substack subscribers, whatever the case may be. Um, I think we're pivoting out of that. And I think with distribution, with the algorithms becoming better at allocating specific types of content to the people who want to receive that content, as
Mm,
the algorithms improve, and then also as we move out of SEO and into AEO, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, okay, like Alex is going to say portfolio career like 5 or 6 times in this thing, and I'm going to say operating as many times as I can. And part of that, of course, is because everyone should do this, by the way, is because we want our videos, our voices, our content. We want all of that indexing against what Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude are feeding back to people over time. Now, these are very tiny examples of this in the immediate, but that is the other, maybe ultimately the best form of distribution moving forward, is that when operating comes up, I want people to find John Brewton content via ChatGPT or Gemini. When portfolio career comes up, I'm sure Alex wants people to find him. And that's great. That's just smart. And I think that is another way of building brand and building awareness that is more productive, more efficient, and much less cringe than just like go build followers and hack an algorithm. Does that make sense?
well, I think it does, and I
No.
think you touched on I was gonna ask this because I'm still figuring it out myself, but what does
Sure.
owning your distribution mean?
Yeah.
What does it actually require that folks underestimate? I think when I started out on this journey, I wrote a LinkedIn or a Substack post back in July called "The Reluctant Showman," and I was talking about
Interesting.
how you know the day I put
Good
a
name.
selfie video on LinkedIn is the day there are hostages in the basement, and that we've passed the Rubicon. I now am posting videos on LinkedIn, and to your point on your wife earlier, at the beginning maybe it felt cringy, but now it actually has become less so. I actually don't think twice about it, and I think
Right.
you know that I think is something that I underestimated about the challenges of owning your distribution that I've been able to overcome. But I think it's an identity thing. We
Mhm.
were taught, or we were maybe not taught, to be careful about what you post online from an employment perspective, or from a
Sure.
what your employer could see in the future. And I think nowadays, if your employer doesn't see your presence online, or they don't see something online, it'll raise more questions than having a strong online presence. I think it's two
Mhm.
sides of the same coin, but we're
Mhm.
living in this period where the rules haven't been written yet, so folks are improvising as they go.
Yes. Yes. Correct. I agree. I
You
I
can't
mean,
agree. You need to
the
disagree. No.
I need to disagree. No, well, here's what I would say. Okay, so I think that how would I put this?
I guess you have a pretty strong
Mm,
distribution now. What
I
have you
do.
learned, and what have you
Well,
found in getting to where you are today?
yeah, I mean, thank you. I okay, so relative to, my distribution, which I'm always trying to make better. I actually had a really bad week distribution wise. It's interesting. That's one of the biggest challenges of all of this, is that you have really good weeks, and then you have bad week, and then good week, and then so half a week, and then like it's always changing,
Mm.
and you have to just keep going. You have to not stop. You stop, and then you throw off the chi of everything, and then it's like, okay, well, start over. But I think you talked about owning your distribution, and so Look, anyone who talks about any thought leadership in the social space and personal branding space is going to say that's exactly why you need to produce content across multiple platforms, because there's distribution risk. You know, Tumblr sold to Yahoo, and like, what happened to Tumblr? Like, what if
Mm.
Substack sells to, I don't know, Google, and they try to whatever. Remember when Google had that social network, what, Google Plus? Remember that?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
what if they Google Plus Substack, and then it's like, and so, which I don't think is going to happen. I have no reason to believe that, but
You're
but
scaring folks,
but
John.
no, no, but seriously, I think it's this question about about where are you able to be found? Um, I think indexing against a in AEO capacity is critical, so that you're able to be found via the primary AI platforms, is really crucial. And then I think also, if you're working in the professional space and you're writing on Substack, well, then it's probably a good idea to also send some of your distribution through LinkedIn. Here's something for LinkedIn relative to distribution. You go into ChatGPT, or you go into Claude, you go into any of them. Like Reddit results and LinkedIn results are some of the biggest results that come back from research.
Mm.
So you should probably be distributing some quantity of your Substack newsletter articles via LinkedIn as well, because that indexes against those other engines. YouTube Shorts, taking your Substack clips and pushing them over onto YouTube Shorts is probably a good idea, relative to what I would imagine the YouTube as the world's second largest search engine will end up meaning relative to Gemini. So I
Mm.
I think yeah, I mean, I think owning your distribution is uh I think it's difficult to continuously be owning it. And I think you have to continuously be pushing to more locations around the web to make that possible.
Well, I think,
So
it's interesting when I heard you when you were talking about that, you reminded me that back in one of my first jobs, I
yeah,
signed incredibly hefty NDAs that are
yeah, they're
really
very
quite
difficult to enforce.
really quite a lot. But one of the things I remember reading them, and I was one of the ones who read everything that I signed for some reason or another, was, one thing that the company kept very confidential and very highly prized was the customer lists, the lists of all the customers, all the clients, everyone involved. And that's exactly sort of what we're talking about now. If everyone's a business of one, your client list, your customer list is your distribution. And I don't know. That's what I was thinking, at least hearing you speak about that.
Yeah, I think I think about it a little differently. I think about it in terms of, if there is platform risk and suddenly something changes on a platform, and I don't have, my account gets deleted on a
Mm.
platform or something. My concern is that then where will people find me? Because I assume that I'm not that interesting, and that people will forget about me very quickly if suddenly I'm not there. Oh, John's not there. Okay, that's okay. There are six more Johns over here that we can go listen to. Like, and so that is my concern. My concern is awareness, is attention and awareness within the audience for the kind of content I make, and for services I provide, and for all of that. And if I lose distribution through one of the primary platforms where I do have an audience, then uh how do I find those people again? And the answer is, it will probably take a long time. And so
Mm.
that's my worry, is losing awareness.
Well, we're coming up on time, but it would be unfortunate if we didn't. It's Jobs Friday. If we didn't get a chance to talk about the most recent jobs numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And I
Go
think,
for it, brother.
you know, what struck me about the piece that you wrote, it was talking about the last employee not necessarily being a tragedy. It's
Mm-mm.
that forcing function. And I think if you look at
Yes.
the numbers that came out today, the economy lost 92,000 jobs in February. That was a big surprise. Economists were expecting a plus 55,000 jobs in
Mhm.
the month. And so
Yeah.
I think, you know, the gate is starting to to lower or it's starting to open, depending on how you look at it. It's
Mhm.
just a matter of who decides to walk through it. And I think
Mhm.
that's the question that we all need to ask ourselves nowadays. Are you willing to walk through, or are you going to stay on the side you're already on?
Yes, and what I would also I think it's a great point, and I think what I would close with is, like, I think it's a great time to make that shift and to choose to walk through into whatever the new direction is that you're going. The last employee, and then I close with saying, like, the first founder, right? And so it's like,
Mm,
because I think there are a lot of people who are leaving uh these more corporate careers behind, and they're becoming an entrepreneur for the first time. They're starting their own business for the first time. And so what I will say is, yes, the jobs numbers are disconcerting, but there is an enormous amount of capital flowing into this country. And there are an enormous number of new projects being started all over the place in this country. And so, and to be clear, that is not a political statement for 1 second from me on anything. But what that is saying, maybe it's a pretty good time to go and start something when there are also some positive things happening economically, when there is some, some juice and some fuel flowing into the economy as well, that will create opportunities and needs that companies will have and people will have to and things they'll want to spend money on. I think there's also that side of it to think about. Because oftentimes when we see these jobs numbers and things going down the way they are and being surprised the way we just were, that's also associated with an immense amount of additional negative economic data, which we just don't have right now. And so I
mm,
think that's a weird, it's like the decoupling thing where
right.
like corporates are like, we're gaining market share and we're reducing cost. And Wall Street's like, wow, that's the holy grail. We love that. And so they're very excited about that. But oh, hey, there's this problem that you and I have been talking a lot about on the employee side. And so maybe it's a great time to go start a business because there are companies out there who have money and are going to want to spend that money on building better companies. And so
Well,
go
to
get
your
yours.
to your point, John, I do work with a lot of startup founders, and there was a
Yep.
point about a year and a half ago where I told a founder, you could be a paper bag and call yourself an AI company, and a venture capitalist would fund you. So I don't think we're quite there anymore, but there's definitely a lot of opportunity out there if you're doing things with AI. You
There
know,
is.
that's what we were talking about today. And, like I said, I'm Alex Randall Kittredge. I write the ARK Strategy newsletter on Substack,
Ah,
helping office workers and knowledge workers build a durable career that transcends the corporate ladder in the post AI economy. I was joined this afternoon by John Brewton.
from Operating by John Brewton. I gotta say too, man, Alex Randall Kittredge. It's a great name.
Oh,
It's
thank
like it
you.
is, man. It's like very memorable. It's good. It's good.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Hope that you have a great afternoon, and we'll be back in 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah, we will. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a really great weekend. Alex, thank you, my friend. It's always a pleasure. And go Knicks. Talk to you later.
Talk soon.
All right, bye.